The Institute for Fiscal Studies, one of Britain's leading economic think tanks, has released its latest forecast for Britain's economy, and it paints a pretty bleak picture for our future. While it forecasts that the Prime Minister will meet his promise to halve inflation by the end of the year, it also expects that the country is in a fiscal bind, that we can neither increase public spending nor cut taxes. The cause of this fiscal bind, it says, owes itself to high levels of indebtedness, an increase in the cost of that debt, and a failure to stimulate growth. This is an unfortunately compelling argument, but we don't have to succumb to this management of decline. One of the lessons of last year's Truss Kwarteng mini-budget is that tax cuts must be supported by spending cuts. In the last year or so, borrowing has simply become too expensive. It's taking too big a part of our national economy. In the year to last May, debt interest payments were £117 billion. That's the third biggest budget after welfare and the NHS. It's more than defence and education and the town halls. We need to cut our coat according to our cloth, and we have to identify cuts first and deliver tax cuts once we've identified where we can reduce spending. As we'll be coming on to later, Whitehall needs reform and rationalisation, but last year there was a plan that could have saved £6 billion to get the civil service back to the numbers of 2015-16, and also a review of these extraordinary grants which go to woke outlets and outfits that are thought to cost £7 billion, according to Conservative Way Forward. We need to look at NHS spending, which grows year in, year out, without any increase in productivity. We have to make sure that money is spent productively. We've got a £20 billion commitment on carbon capture, an experimental green technology which may or may not work, and surely it should be the private sector that determines new technologies. We have announced the scrapping of HS2, but then decided to spend the money on all sorts of other projects that haven't yet been tested. Money needs to be saved, not simply reallocated. And we need to recognise that everything that is paid for is ultimately paid for by the private sector, people keeping their own money. That's where we need the tax cuts, so you and I keep more of what we earn, and businesses do too. The harmful increase of corporation tax to 25% needs to be reversed. This punitive tax has serious consequences on the British economy. Already AstraZeneca said that that's why it moved its factory to Ireland. And we need to make lives easier for people rather than harder. The inflation stealth tax on your earnings is going to be kicking in. The government has frozen income tax brackets, which the IFS predicts is the same as 6p on the basic rate of income tax. As I've said before, we should abolish death duties, which is an inefficient tax that leads to the misallocation of capital and doesn't raise much money. Later on, we'll be remembering the late Chancellor Nigel Lawson, who had his memorial service earlier today in St Margaret's, Westminster. We must remember the lessons he taught us. Growing Britain's economy is the solution to our woes and would be a consequence of reducing the squeeze on taxpayers. As always, I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts. mailmog@gbnews.com.